Columbus's miscalculation. He thought Asia was just weeks away. He was wrong, by an entire continent. In the late 1400s, Christopher Columbus believed that Asia could be reached by sailing west from Europe. He had read ancient calculations that correctly measured the Earth's size, but he chose to ignore them. Columbus insisted the planet was much smaller than it actually was, convinced that Japan and China were just beyond the Atlantic. In 1492, with 3 ships and a desperate dream, he set sail. After months of hunger, storms, and near mutiny, his crew finally saw land. But it wasn't Asia. It was the Caribbean, a place unknown to Europe. Columbus thought he had reached the East Indies and called the people he met Indians. His mistake changed the course of history. It opened the door for European conquest and colonization on a scale the world had never seen. Within decades, explorers, soldiers, and priests followed in his wake. New plants and animals crossed oceans, but so did diseases like smallpox, measles, and influenza. For the indigenous peoples of the Americas, these invisible invaders were far deadlier than any sword. Entire civilizations collapsed. Populations dropped by as much as 90%. A miscalculation on a map triggered one of humanity's greatest tragedies. The age of exploration began, and so did the age of conquest. The Fall of Constantinople, the rejected engineer. A poor empire turned down an inventor and gave its enemy the weapon that would end it. In 1452, an engineer named Orban arrived in Constantinople, the last surviving capital of the Byzantine Empire. He presented Emperor Constantine XI with his plans for a massive new cannon, a superweapon that could destroy even the strongest walls. But the emperor's treasury was empty. The empire was surrounded, its power fading. He told Orban that he could not afford his work, so Orban left. A few months later, he appeared in the court of the Ottoman Sultan Mehmed II, who welcomed him with gold and resources. With the Sultan's support, Orban constructed an enormous bronze cannon, so heavy that it took 60 oxen and hundreds of men to move it. When it fired, the ground shook for miles. In April 1453, the Ottomans began their siege. For weeks, the great cannon pounded the walls of Constantinople. No fortress in the world had ever faced such power. On May 29th, the walls broke. Soldiers poured in, and the 1,000-year-old Byzantine Empire fell. The Christian capital of the East became the Muslim city of Istanbul. Orban's invention reshaped history. A single engineer's rejection by one ruler, and acceptance by another, marked the end of the Middle Ages and the dawn of a new empire. The Shah who killed a messenger. One beheaded messenger started a war that erased an empire. In 1218, Genghis Khan ruled a powerful Mongol state stretching from China to Central Asia. He wanted to open trade with his western neighbor, the Khwarezmian Empire. He sent a caravan filled with merchants and gifts. But a local governor saw an opportunity for profit and attacked the caravan, killing the merchants and taking their goods. Genghis didn't want war. He sent envoys to the Shah, asking for the governor to be punished and peace restored. The Shah, proud and suspicious, made a fatal mistake. He executed one of the Mongol ambassadors and sent his head back with the survivors. In Mongol culture, killing an envoy was an unforgivable insult. It meant war. Genghis Khan responded with the full force of his empire. His armies crossed the desert and stormed city after city. Some surrendered and were spared. Most resisted and were destroyed. Entire populations were wiped out, towns burned to the ground, rivers clogged with the dead. By 1221, the Khwarezmian Empire was gone. Millions had died. A single political insult had unleashed one of the deadliest military campaigns in history. When pride rules over reason, even a simple message can become the spark that burns down a world. The wrong turn in Sarajevo. A driver made a wrong turn, and the world plunged into war. June 28, 1914. Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary was visiting Sarajevo. That morning, an assassin had already tried to kill him with a bomb, which exploded under the wrong car. The Archduke insisted on continuing his trip to visit the wounded. For safety, officials decided to change the route, but no one told the driver. As the car rolled down a narrow street, it turned onto Franz Josefstrasse, right where one of the failed assassins, Gavrilo Princip, was standing outside a cafe. When the driver realized the mistake and tried to reverse, the car stalled. Princip stepped forward, pulled out his pistol and fired 2 shots. Franz Ferdinand and his wife Sophie were killed instantly. The assassination triggered a chain reaction of alliances and declarations. Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia. Russia backed Serbia. Germany supported Austria. France and Britain joined in. Within weeks, World War I began. By the time it ended, more than 16 million people were dead, empires were gone, and an entire generation was lost, all because of a driver's wrong turn. The treaty that built the next war. The war ended. The peace agreement guaranteed the next one. In 1919, the leaders of the victorious nations met in Paris to decide Germany's fate. The Treaty of Versailles forced Germany to take full blame for the war, lose land and colonies, and pay impossible reparations. Germany's economy collapsed. Inflation turned money into worthless paper. Families starved while politicians argued. The treaty humiliated the country, turning bitterness into rage. In that chaos, extremists rose. One of them was a failed artist and soldier named Adolf Hitler. He promised to tear up the treaty, rebuild the military, and restore national pride. Desperate people listened. 2 decades later, his words became tanks rolling across Europe. The Second World War killed more than 70 million people. The Treaty of Versailles was supposed to end war forever. Instead, it built the foundation for another. Operation Barbarossa, invading the wrong country. Hitler thought he could conquer the Soviet Union in weeks. Instead, he destroyed his own empire. In June 1941, Nazi Germany launched Operation Barbarossa, the largest military invasion in history. 3 million soldiers, thousands of tanks, and planes crossed into the Soviet Union. Hitler believed the Red Army would collapse quickly. He ignored the warnings of his generals, the length of the supply lines, and the coming winter. At first, the plan worked. The Germans advanced hundreds of kilometers, capturing millions of Soviet soldiers. But the deeper they went, the slower they became. The roads turned to mud. Fuel ran out. Winter came early. When temperatures dropped below -30 degrees, engines froze, and soldiers died standing in the snow. The Soviets regrouped and counterattacked near Moscow. For the first time, the German army retreated. Barbarossa failed, and with it, Germany's chance to win the war. Over 25 million Soviets died, and the Eastern Front became the deadliest battlefield in human history. Arrogance turned victory into destruction. The Four Pests Campaign. Mao Zedong declared war on sparrows, and nature fought back with famine. In 1958, China began the Four Pests Campaign. The goal was to wipe out rats, flies, mosquitoes, and sparrows, which were accused of eating too much grain. Millions of citizens took part in mass exterminations. Children climbed trees to destroy nests. Villagers banged drums and pots to keep birds in the air until they dropped dead from exhaustion. By the end of the campaign, sparrows had almost disappeared. At first, the government celebrated. Then came the insects. With no birds to control them, locusts multiplied across the countryside, destroying crops everywhere. Combined with false reports, bad planning, and forced agricultural experiments, the result was catastrophic. Between 1959 and 1961, famine spread through China. Tens of millions died of starvation. Mao's war on nature showed how ideology, when unchecked, can kill more effectively than any weapon. The Chernobyl Disaster. A test that went wrong. A simple safety test became the worst nuclear accident in history. April 26, 1986. At the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in the Soviet Union, engineers prepared a late-night safety test. They wanted to see how long turbines could keep running after a power loss. But to make it work, they disabled several key safety systems. When the reactor's power dropped too low, they tried to fix it manually, ignoring every protocol. At 1:23 a.m., the reactor became unstable and exploded. The roof was blown apart, and tons of radioactive material were thrown into the sky. Firefighters rushed in without protection, not realizing they were walking into deadly radiation. Within hours, several were dying from acute radiation sickness. The nearby city of Pripyat, home to 50,000 people, was evacuated the next day, too late for many. Radioactive clouds drifted across Europe. Children drank contaminated milk, and entire regions were poisoned. Decades later, cancers, birth defects, and empty ghost towns still mark the disaster. Chernobyl wasn't caused by a storm or by chance, but by people, by arrogance, pressure, and denial. A routine test, a few wrong switches, and one of the most dangerous machines on Earth destroyed itself.